grossly underestimating the numbers of people who suffer adverse reactions to hair dyes after hearing evidence about the death of a mum of 2 from Keighley.
38-year-old Julie McCabe suffered a massive allergic reaction after colouring her hair. She died after being in a coma for 12 months. While recording a verdict of accidental death, the coroner, Jeff Fell, said more research was needed into the chemicals used in both hair dyes and in henna tattoos. Danny Carpenter was at the inquest.
In his closing comments at the end of the inquest, the coroner, Mr. Jeff Fell, said that he wanted to highlight the dangers of black henna tattoos. Now, Julie McCabe, a 38-year-old mother of 2 from Keighley, had one of these tattoos while on holiday in 2007. Now, she always suffered a mild allergic reaction to her hair dye, but after the tattoo, they became dramatically worse. The tattoos contain a chemical called PPD in massive doses, which is also used in much smaller doses in hair dye, and it's this that probably caused the anaphylactic shock which killed her. Now, he recorded a verdict of accidental death on Mrs. McCabe, and afterwards her family's lawyer said they wanted to see changes to the way these products were packaged.
The husband would really like to see improved warnings on the box and on the leaflet inside the box. At the moment, the warnings just say there's a risk of severe reaction. I think having gone through what he's gone through, and he's not the first person to lose a spouse as a consequence of this, he'd really like to see a more detailed warning, particularly with regards to the risk of brain injury or even death.
In a statement, L'Oreal, the company that made the hair dye, said that their thoughts were with Julie McCabe's family. And they said that the case highlighted how important it was to follow the safety instructions on the packaging and to do an allergy test at least 48 hours before each use of the hair dye. Now, the coroner, Mr. Fell, was also critical of the way that the industry collects its statistics. He referred to an academic study which suggested that up to 140,000 people in each million users could suffer some kind of adverse reaction. The industry was working on an estimate of just 4 per million. Now, he described that as a gross underestimate and said that he would be writing to the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills and asking them to help rectify it.
Brian Plunkett is an expert in hair science who's been working closely with Julie's family. I asked him if people should be worried about using hair dyes.
No, just careful. Carry out a predictive test, a skin test, every time you apply hair dye.
We know that Julie was aware of her allergy. She was at the doctor's on numerous occasions. Is that typical behaviour, that people continue to dye their hair in spite of these health problems?
Yes, people put up with lots of things for beauty, to look better. And it's not indicative of the whole thing, but yeah, a lot of people do it.
There was another factor, wasn't there, in this case that made her more susceptible?
Well, that was the black henna tattoo that the coroner mentioned. And, you know, in hair dye you have 1% PPD, paraphenylene diamine. In black henna tattoos, there's something like 69%, which is lethal. Because if you're exposed to it when you're a child, on holiday with your mum, with your parents, then of course you are, doesn't have a problem, but when you come to use the hair dye, when you're older, of course, your body will react to that.
So that's surely the question. Here you have a potentially lethal chemical. No matter how small the risk, why is that in a cosmetic product?
Because there's nothing else. There's no oxidative hair dyes that will not wash out. Once you're sensitised to PPD, it's for life.
So what's the answer here? Does the government need to intervene? The cosmetics industry obviously has a role to play.
I think so. I think, again, going back to the coroner's report, that he is going to write to Business, Innovation and Skills, BIS, to try and warn and bring in a bigger recognition that PPD in black henna tattoo is a problem. Not only for hair dye, but for other things. That you may be associated with rubbers, printing inks, dyes in clothing, this sort of thing. And the other thing is getting in touch with, through what they call CPTA, Cosmetic Toiletries Perfumeries Association, to ask them to start looking at the instruction leaflet, to say, gather more data, because the cases of hair dye allergy are far greater.
Brian Plunkett, thank you very much for your time this evening. And we'll have the reaction of Julie McCabe's family on the Late Look North as part of the 10 o'clock news this evening.
Later on Look North,